Eric Johnson, a 45-year-old lieutenant colonel in the Miami Police Department, took great pride in his work after over 20 years of service. He and his family had built a comfortable and secure life in Miami. His wife, Angela, worked as a nurse at the local hospital, and their teenage children, Jason and Mia, were happy and well integrated in their schools. Hello, welcome, enjoy, subscribe, and turn on notifications. One Monday morning, Eric was reviewing reports in his office when he received a call from the chief of police. He was summoned to an urgent meeting. "Eric, we have a situation," began the chief with a serious tone. "You've been reassigned to a special operation in Clearwater, Florida. They need someone with your experience there." "Reassigned?" Eric was stunned. "But sir, my family is settled here. Why Clearwater?" The request came directly from the governor. "It's a matter of necessity. I understand it's a change, but we believe you're the right man for the job." Eric left the meeting feeling overwhelmed. He knew the move would be difficult for his family, but duty called. When he got home, Angela was in the kitchen preparing dinner, and the kids were laughing at something on TV. "Honey, we need to talk," he said with a serious expression. Angela looked at him, concerned. "What's going on?" Eric sighed. "I've been reassigned to Clearwater, Florida. We have to move in a month." Jason and Mia overheard and came into the kitchen. "Move to Florida?" Jason asked, incredulous. "What about our friends in school?" "I know it's a big change, son," Eric replied, trying to stay calm, "but it's an important opportunity for my career. We need to support each other as a family." Angela nodded, trying to hide the worry on her face. "All right, Eric, we'll face this together." In the days that followed, the Johnson family began preparing for the move. They said goodbye to friends and colleagues, packed their belongings, and mentally prepared for the new chapter in Clearwater. On the eve of the move, Eric and Angela talked about the future as they packed the last of their things. "I'm worried about how we'll be received there," Eric said, looking out the living room window. "It'll be fine, Eric. You've always overcome challenges, and we'll be together in this," Angela said, squeezing his hand. "I hope so, Angela. I really hope so." With a mix of anticipation and apprehension, the Johnson family headed to Clearwater, ready to face the unknown and determined to stay united no matter the challenges that awaited them. The drive from Miami to Clearwater was long and quiet. Eric drove the family car while Angela and the kids watched as the scenery gradually changed. The tall buildings of Miami gave way to open fields and quieter roads. The anxiety was palpable in the air as they finally arrived in Clearwater. The small town seemed sleepy, a stark contrast to the vibrant Miami. The houses were smaller, the streets narrower, and the pace of life clearly slower. "Welcome to Clearwater," Eric said, trying to sound optimistic, though he knew his family felt the same nervousness he did. "It's different," Mia commented, looking out the car window. "It's definitely not Miami," Jason added, crossing his arms. Angela tried to stay optimistic. "Let's give it a chance. Who knows? It might be a good change." They drove to the house that the station had arranged for them. It was a simple house, but spacious enough for the family. As they unloaded their bags, neighbors watched from their porches, some with curious looks, others with less friendly expressions. The next morning, Eric went to the Clearwater police station to introduce himself. The building was old, with red brick walls and a faded sign. He entered and was greeted by a receptionist who seemed surprised to see him. "Good morning. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Eric Johnson. I'm here to take command of the special operation." The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with gray hair, looked at him for a moment before responding, Yes, of course. I'll get the chief." While waiting, Eric observed his surroundings. Several white officers looked at him with suspicion. Finally, the station's chief, Captain Rodriguez, appeared. He was a stout man in his 50s with a stern expression. "Johnson, right? Let's talk in my office." Once inside, Rodriguez closed the door and sat down, indicating that Eric should take a seat. "Listen, Johnson, I know you've been sent from above, but we have our own way of doing things here." Eric remained calm. "Understood, Captain. I'm here to help and collaborate in any way necessary." Rodriguez smiled, though the smile didn't reach his eyes. "Great. I hope we can come to an understanding." At home, Angela and the kids were unpacking the last boxes. Angela paused for a moment and looked out the window, watching the neighbors. I hope we can adapt here, she said, more to herself than to the kids. We'll make it, Mom, Jason said, trying to be positive. It'll be tough, but we're strong. Mia, who was organizing her books on the shelf, looked at her mom. Yes, together we can do it. That night, the family gathered for dinner. Despite being in a new environment, the family ritual brought some comfort. Eric talked about his first day at the station and his impressions. It won't be easy, Eric admitted, but we've faced tough things before. We'll get through this together. Angela held Eric's hand for a moment. We're all in this together, one day at a time. And so, the Johnson family began to adjust to life in Clearwater, aware of the challenges they would face but determined to remain united and strong. In the early days in Clearwater, the Johnson family tried to establish a new routine. Eric left early for the station, where the reception remained cold and the suspicious glances persisted. Angela started at the local hospital, where she also felt some distance from her colleagues. But her kind and professional nature soon began to break down barriers. Jason and Mia started classes at their new school, where they faced both curiosity and prejudice. At the station, Eric realized it would be a long road to earning the trust of his new team. One morning, as he arrived for the daily meeting, he noticed that conversations abruptly stopped when he entered the room. "Good morning, everyone," Eric said, trying to sound confident. Some responded with murmurs, while others barely looked at him. Sergeant Thompson, one of the veterans, seemed particularly reluctant to accept Eric's presence. "Let's start with the updates on the ongoing cases," Eric said, looking at the papers in front of him. "Thompson, can you update us on the investigation of the robbery on Main Street?" Thompson gave Eric a cold look before responding. "We're following the usual leads. Nothing new so far." Eric remained calm. "All right, we need more effort on this. Let's talk after the meeting." Thompson reluctantly nodded. "Sure." Meanwhile, at the hospital, Angela was also facing her challenges. During a break, she tried to socialize with some of the other nurses, but the reception was lukewarm. "Hi, I'm Angela Johnson. I just moved here with my family." One of the nurses, Sarah, smiled briefly. "Oh, you're the new cop's wife. I hope you settle in well." "Thanks," Angela replied, trying to hide her disappointment at the vague response. "I'm excited to work here and get to know everyone." At school, Jason and Mia were trying to find their place. Jason sat with some classmates, but the conversation quickly turned to his father. "I heard your dad's a big-shot cop from Miami," one of the boys said in a tone Jason couldn't decipher. "Has he ever arrested anyone famous?" "Not that I know of," Jason replied, trying to keep the conversation light. "But he's really good at what he does." "I hope so," the boy said, glancing at the others. "You're different here." Mia, on the other hand, faced more direct comments. As she walked down the halls, she heard whispers and laughter. One of the girls approached her. "So, you're new here, right? Where are you from?" "Miami," Mia replied, trying to sound confident. "Oh, a big city. I hope you can get used to our small town," the girl said with a smile that didn't seem friendly. That night, the family gathered for dinner, a moment everyone looked forward to after a tough day. Eric shared his interaction with Thompson and the sergeant's indifferent response. "This is unacceptable," Angela said, concerned. "You can't keep being treated like this." "I know, Angela. I'm documenting everything, but I need to be careful. I can't lose my temper." "Today in basketball, one of the boys started making jokes about you, Dad." "They don't understand," Jason added. "And at school, the girls make it seem like I don't belong here," Mia nodded. Eric sighed. "We're all facing this, but we need to be strong. They want us to give up, to show weakness, but we won't." Angela held Eric's hand. "We're in this together, and we'll get through it." With the unwavering support of his family, Eric knew he could face the challenges in Clearwater. The fight against prejudice would be long and difficult, but together they could overcome any adversity. It was a Friday night when Eric decided to go for a jog through the quiet streets of Clearwater. He always found peace in running, a chance to clear his mind and relieve the stress of the week. He put on his running gear, put on his headphones, and left the house. As he ran, Eric reflected on the challenges his family had been facing. The resistance at the station, the prejudice at school for Jason and Mia, and the suspicious looks from some neighbors. But he also thought about his family's strength, the unity that kept them together. The night was cool, and the streets were deserted. After about 30 minutes, Eric decided to head back home. On his way back, he noticed a police car patrolling the area. Eric waved casually, but the car stopped, and 2 officers quickly got out. "Hey you! Stop!" one of the officers shouted, his hand near the holster of his gun. "What are you doing here at this hour? You don't seem to be from around here." "I'm just jogging," Eric replied calmly. "I'm the lieutenant colonel recently transferred to the Clearwater station." The second officer, a young man with a thin face, looked at him with suspicion. "ID?" Eric took a deep breath, feeling the tension rise. "I don't have my ID now. I'm just jogging near my house." The first officer scoffed. "Sure, Johnson. You expect us to believe someone like you lives in this neighborhood?" "Exactly what do you mean by someone like me?" Eric asked, keeping his voice steady. "You know very well what I mean. Now, get down on the ground. Hands on your head," the older officer ordered. Eric raised his hands in a calming gesture. "Officers, this is a big misunderstanding. I really am a lieutenant colonel in the police. We can resolve this peacefully." "Get down on the ground now," the younger officer shouted, pulling out his baton. Feeling the situation spiraling out of control, Eric slowly knelt down and lay on the ground. The officers quickly handcuffed him, ignoring his attempts to explain. "Nice catch," the older officer said, giving Eric a slight kick in the side. "Let's see what else we can find out about you." Meanwhile, at home, Angela began to worry about Eric's delay. He usually didn't stay out this long. She called his cell phone, but there was no answer. "Jason, Mia, come here," Angela called, trying to hide the growing anxiety in her voice. "What's wrong, Mom?" Jason asked, entering the room with Mia. "Your dad is taking longer than usual. I'm worried." Jason grabbed the car keys. "I'll go look for him. He must be nearby." Mia took her mother's hand. "He'll be fine, Mom." Jason drove around the nearby streets, looking for Eric when he saw the flashing lights of a police car in the distance. His heart raced as he approached and saw Eric handcuffed, being pushed into the back seat of the car. "Dad!" Jason shouted, getting out of the car and running towards the officers. "Son, stay calm," Eric said, trying to appear calm. "Please, take my documents from home and bring them here." The older officer looked at Jason with disdain. "Who are you?" "I'm his son. I'll go get the documents now." Jason ran back home, grabbed Eric's wallet, and returned in a few minutes. He handed the documents to the officers, who finally verified Eric's identity. "Damn," the young officer muttered, realizing the mistake. The older officer looked furious, but knew they had made a big mistake. "Take off the cuffs." "Apologies for the misunderstanding," the young officer said, clearly uncomfortable. Eric stood up, rubbing his wrists. "This misunderstanding won't be forgotten. You'll answer for it." Back at home, Angela hugged Eric tightly, relieved to see him safe. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I am, but this can't stand," Eric said with clear determination in his eyes. "They must be held accountable." The incident not only shook the Johnson family but also ignited a flame of justice in Eric, who knew that the fight against prejudice in Clearwater was just beginning. After the humiliating incident, Eric Johnson returned home with a mix of frustration and determination. The situation he had faced the night before couldn't be ignored. He needed to act, not just for himself, but to ensure that others wouldn't go through the same thing. The next morning, the house was quiet, each family member absorbed in their thoughts about what had happened. Eric knew he needed to talk to everyone about the next step. "Let's have some coffee together," Eric said, trying to sound calm. As they sat down at the table, Angela looked at him with concern. "What are you going to do, Eric?" "I'm going to report the incident to the chief of police. They need to know what happened. Also, I intend to file a formal complaint." Jason, visibly still affected by what he witnessed, looked at his father with admiration. "Do you think this will change anything, Dad?" "Maybe not immediately, son," Eric replied, "but it's a start, and it's the right thing to do." After coffee, Eric headed to the station. As he entered, he felt his colleagues' eyes fixed on him. He went straight to Captain Rodriguez's office and knocked on the door. "Come in," Rodriguez said without looking up from the papers in front of him. "Captain, I need to talk to you about something serious that happened last night," Eric said, closing the door behind him. Rodriguez looked at him, finally raising his eyes. "What happened, Johnson?" Eric detailed the incident, from the officer's approach to the humiliation he suffered. Rodriguez listened in silence, his expression growing more serious. "This is unacceptable," Rodriguez finally said. "Do you have witnesses?" "My son Jason saw everything, and I want to file a formal complaint against the officers involved." Rodriguez sighed, running his hand through his hair. "I'll take care of it. We'll investigate and take appropriate action." Meanwhile, at school, Jason and Mia were also dealing with the aftermath. Jason was approached by Brian, the boy who used to tease him. "I heard your dad was arrested last night," Brian said with a sarcastic smile. "It was a mistake," Jason replied, trying to stay calm. "They didn't know who he was." "Yeah, I heard, but Jason, sometimes even if you're someone important, people will judge you by the color of your skin." Jason looked at Brian, trying not to let his anger show. "My dad will do the right thing, and that will change things." Brian shrugged. "We'll see." At the station, the investigations began. Eric continued doing his job, but the atmosphere was more tense than ever. Some colleagues began avoiding eye contact, while others looked at him with open disdain. He knew they were watching him closely. One afternoon, while reviewing reports, his office door opened abruptly. It was Thompson. "Can we talk?" Thompson asked with an unreadable expression. Eric nodded, indicating for Thompson to sit. "What do you want?" "I heard what happened," Thompson began, avoiding Eric's gaze. "I'm not going to lie. I don't like how things are changing around here, but no one deserves to go through what you did." "It's good to hear that, Thompson," Eric said without expression. "But words aren't enough. We need action. This can't continue." Thompson stood up, hesitating. "I know. I hope things change." That night at home, Eric and Angela talked about the next steps. "Do you really think they're going to do something about it?" Angela asked, worried. "I hope so," Eric replied. "But if they don't, we'll take it further. We'll go to the media if necessary. I won't let this go unpunished." Angela held Eric's hand. "We're all with you. We'll get through this together." With the firm decision to fight against injustice, Eric knew the battle was just beginning. He was prepared to face the challenges, knowing his family and justice were on his side. The next morning, Eric Johnson arrived at the station with renewed determination. He knew the road ahead would be arduous, but he was ready to fight for justice. As he entered, he noticed a subtle change in the atmosphere. Whispers ran through the halls, and curious glances followed him. Captain Rodriguez had ordered an internal investigation into the incident, and the presence of external investigators at the station only increased the tension. Eric met with the lead investigator, Detective Ramirez, a middle-aged man with a sharp eye. "Good morning, Lieutenant Colonel Johnson," Ramirez said, shaking Eric's hand firmly. "I'm here to conduct the investigation into what happened Friday night." "Good morning, Detective Ramirez," Eric replied. "Thank you for being here. I'm willing to cooperate in any way possible." Meanwhile, at school, Jason and Mia were also facing the consequences of the incident. During history class, the teacher, Mrs. Smith, addressed the topic of civil rights and the fight against racism. Jason knew everyone in the room was thinking about him and his family. "We can learn a lot from history," Mrs. Smith said, "but we also need to reflect on what happens in our own lives and communities." After class, Brian approached Jason again. "Man, it seems like your family is in the middle of a storm." "Yes, and we're fighting for justice," Jason replied, trying to stay calm. "This won't stop us." At the station, Eric sat down with Ramirez and two other investigators, recounting the events of the night of the incident. "I was just jogging near my house," Eric explained, "when the officers approached me. I tried to explain who I was, but they didn't want to listen." Ramirez took detailed notes. "I understand. We'll talk to the officers involved and review what happened." As the investigation continued, the tension at the station grew. Many officers began to feel the pressure, knowing their actions were being scrutinized. Sergeant Thompson, who had been reluctant from the beginning, now seemed more cautious. "Johnson, can I talk to you?" Thompson approached Eric in the hallway. "Of course, Thompson," Eric replied, maintaining a neutral tone. Thompson hesitated before speaking. "I don't agree with everything that's happening, but no one deserves to go through what you did. If you need anything, I'm here." Eric looked at Thompson, surprised by the sudden change in his attitude. "Thanks, Thompson. We need to work together to change things around here." At home, Angela was worried about the safety of Eric and the kids. "Eric, I'm scared of what might happen. What if they try to retaliate?" "I know it's hard, Angela," Eric replied, taking her hand, "but we have to be strong. I'm doing this for us and for everyone who faces the same prejudice." Mia, who was listening to the conversation, approached. "Dad, we're with you. We'll get through this together." The following week, the investigators completed their analysis of the evidence and statements. Captain Rodriguez called a meeting with Eric and the officers involved. "Johnson, we want to inform you that after a thorough investigation, the officers responsible for the incident have been found guilty of misconduct and will be suspended immediately," Rodriguez said, looking directly at Eric. "This is a step in the right direction," Eric responded. "Thank you for your support, Captain." As he left the meeting, he felt a weight lifted from his shoulders. He knew the battle was far from over, but this was a start. He walked out of the station, looked up at the sky, and felt a new hope growing inside him. At home, Eric shared the news with his family. Angela smiled with relief, and Jason and Mia hugged him. It had been a few weeks since the officers involved were suspended. Eric Johnson focused on preparing for the next step, the trial. The case had gained notoriety in the town, and the community was divided between those who supported Eric and those who still resisted change. On the morning of the trial, Eric arrived at the courthouse accompanied by his lawyer, Mr. Harris, and his family. Angela held his hand firmly, while Jason and Mia stood by his side, both with determined expressions. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was solemn. The lawyers on both sides were prepared to present their arguments. The judge entered the room, and everyone stood up. "You may be seated," the judge said as he settled into his chair. "We are here today to determine the guilt of the accused in the case of misconduct and abuse of power against Lieutenant Colonel Eric Johnson." The defense attorney, Mr. Walker, stood up first to present his case. "Your Honor, my clients acted with limited information and in a high-tension situation. They acted according to police protocol to ensure the community's safety." Then, Eric's lawyer, Mr. Harris, made his statement. "Your Honor, this case is not just about a procedural error. It's a pattern of racial discrimination that cannot be tolerated. My client was the victim of unjust and humiliating treatment simply because of the color of his skin." During the trial, witnesses were called to testify, including Jason, who described the emotional impact the incident had on his family. Mia also spoke about how the event affected her view of justice and equality. After days of arguments and deliberations, the judge finally gave his verdict. Based on the evidence presented and the testimony of the witnesses, this court finds the accused guilty of misconduct and abuse of power. They will be suspended from their duties immediately and face additional disciplinary consequences. A murmur of approval swept through the room. Angela squeezed Eric's hand with relief, while Jason and Mia hugged each other excitedly. "We did it, Dad," Jason said with a smile on his face. "We got justice." Eric looked at his family with gratitude. "Yes, we did. But this isn't just a victory for us. It's a victory for everyone fighting for justice." After the trial, Eric and his family were surrounded by friends, supporters, and reporters. The local media wanted to know their opinion on the verdict and the case's impact on the community. "This verdict shows that justice has prevailed," Eric said to the reporters. "But our fight doesn't end here. We will continue to work to create a community where everyone is treated with equality and respect." At home, after a long day, Eric sat down with his family for a quiet meal. They talked about the trial, reflected on the challenges they faced, and celebrated the victory. "I'm proud of you, Eric," Angela said, smiling at him. "You've shown courage and determination throughout this process." Eric held Angela's hand. "I couldn't have done it without you by my side. You're my strength." Jason and Mia exchanged a look of pride. "We're here to support you, Dad," Mia said with a smile. With justice finally achieved, Eric Johnson knew he had made a difference, not just for his family, but for the entire Clearwater community. The fight against prejudice and discrimination would continue, but they were more united and determined than ever. I hope you enjoyed this beautiful story of love and the fight for equality. Like, comment, and share. Your participation is very important to our community. Be sure to subscribe to our channel